Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, welcome to the show. I wish that we had the energy that the announcer guy, what's the guy's name, was like Ed. I want to say it was Ed. He's going to be Ed from here on out. That's what, if he's not Ed, he should be an Ed. But yeah, good guy, does a lot of good voiceover work, I guess. It was going to be Ed or Brandon was going to do the voiceover. Brandon didn't have as cool music that I shouldn't say that. Brandon has music. It's just, I don't know if it would have been music we could have played along with.
I don't know that we could have afforded the copyright infringement that may have happened about the intro music. So
yeah, no, I'm with you. We were just talking before we came on the show about the Masters, and of course, Dr. Mo, we're all dialed in now that after that conversation about seeing him and how his golfers did, or the golfers he works with did. But I was just saying to Brandon that, that Hideki Matsuyama, is that what you said is the, there was a run, and this is where it's so important to have, this is why mental performance, as you were pointing out, where you could really start to see it take place within the Masters tournament, especially in a major championship like that. But there was a stretch where I want to say it was around 13th or 14th. It's a par 5, and Schauffele has a putt for eagle, and he barely misses it. It's like, a few inches or whatever. But that would have put him in a position where that next birdie he got on the next hole would have been 10 under. So now all of a sudden, because at that point, Matsuyama is just kind of, he's not doing anything. He's going to hurt himself. He's got a big enough lead. But I remember saying I would love to have seen what it would have been like had Schauffele made it to 10 earlier. I know he ultimately got there, but if he would have made it 10 under, because now all of a sudden it's a little bit different, right? It's a little different playing with 13 under than it is, with only 3-stroke lead than it is, when you've got like 5 or whatever.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the pucker factor, right?
Yes.
That backside tends to tense up a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting if our listeners watch or listen to some of the coverage this past weekend. It was amazing how often, and it didn't matter if it was ESPN's coverage or CBS's, the commentators repeatedly talked about the mental aspect of the game, and it was interesting, on the heels of our podcast and everything that we're doing to kind of hear it in the actually being talked about and mentioned. And, with Schauffele, for example, if you looked at his scorecard, he came out, I think he parred 1 and then bogeyed the next 3. And so if you really looked at what his mental game was, and I know that there was a breakdown, there on 16 right after he cut it within a couple of strokes. But he did a fantastic job of kind of mentally taking care of what needed to be taken care of, even though he wasn't really, the outcome wasn't what he wanted it to be on the scorecard. Fast forward 2.5 hours in that grind of, mentally kind of hanging in, and he cuts it. And then I think too, when he saw, to your point, John, how cool and tempered Hideki was, because, he cuts it within a couple of strokes, and then Hideki puts one in the water. Right. And you're thinking,
here we go.
This is getting ready to get really interesting. And Hideki got over the ball like he did every other time, and knocked it. It was interesting too, because I think Nick Faldo had even said, "Hey, oh my God, it looks like he's going to shoot for the pin."
Yeah.
And he said that is not the play here. The play is you've got essentially 4 strokes in your pocket. Spend 1 here, hit it short, tap in 2 for bogey, and you got 3 to play with 2 to go. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting, but it was very cool to kind of see what we're talking about on national TV and the importance that it's starting to play.
Well, the golf, as we talked about last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago now, it's such a sport that lends itself to the mental performance and why people need to really work on that mental side of it. Because it's funny, I saw one time Matsuyama is actually running from the tee box. Like I think it was probably just to get himself, like he's got all this adrenaline going, like do something that's going to calm him down. Like if you get the heart, sped up a little bit just from that little bit of a jog or whatever, maybe it wears you down a little bit so you're not so amped up. Because as you know, being a coach yourself and having been an athlete, one of the things that you see time and time again is when people start to get in pressure situations with where they get a little bit more anxious, the first thing that they want to do is speed themselves up. Sure. Everything starts to work faster. And I think about, was the guy's name John Vanderbilt?
Who just absolutely imploded in the British, and it's been a long time ago. But I think he went into the last hole up by 4.
Yeah,
and he ended up losing it, and it's again, it gets into that pucker factor. But I tell you what's also really interesting, and again, it kind of dovetails with what Dr. Mo had talked about, where he doesn't and his clients don't put any more importance on the fact that it's the Masters.
Right.
It's just Augusta National. So what was interesting today is, I got up early, and I like to kind of go out to Barstool Sports and kind of take a look at what's going on. And at some point during the day, they post about Hideki. Basically, he was on a flight coming out of Atlanta. He was on a 6:45 flight this morning, flying to Chicago with the assumption that from Chicago, he's probably flying back to Tokyo. But he's walking through the Atlanta airport in a T-shirt, jeans. He's literally got his Masters jacket over his arm. It's just sitting there. It's not. He didn't give it any reverence, and he never let the moment. He accepted the challenge.
You're right.
He never let the moment get too big, and that was it was really interesting to see that.
It's really hard to do, though. And you made me think about this when you were talking about how Nick Faldo says, "Oh, that's not the right play." There's so many times, though. I mean, if you're really truly going to stay true to your character, if you've been aggressive for most of the tournament or whatever, it's hard to start thinking, okay, I'm going to now play to the middle of the green here. I'm not going to stay to form what got me here. The challenge becomes, if I start thinking that way, then I'm also starting to think ahead. Like that was one thing that I know Dr. Mo talked about this. Tewksbury even talked about it a little bit when he used the example of golf, where he said, how many times you're playing golf and you are like, I only have to par the next 4 holes and I'm going to have my best score. It's the same thing. Imagine if you're playing in the Masters or and you start thinking, and I think really that's what happened to John Vandervelde. Was it John?
Yeah, I think so.
It is now. One of the Vandervelde boys. But I don't think he tunes in.
The Vanderveldes. Those dudes from over the pond, the Vanderveldes. But I think to that point, you're 69 holes or 70 holes into a tournament, and you're 4 strokes ahead. So whatever you're doing is working. Right. And it's really hard to throttle down. But I think what I like what you just said there, where it does start to put an emphasis on not being present. But I think also, and we've talked about this, right, several times, and it's the one thing that I think, as a competitor and as someone that was both of us, I think anybody that gets to that level, any level really of any kind of athletics, there has to be this kind of hyper competitiveness or desire to win or succeed. And Andy Reese talked about this. Hey, we're not just out here saying don't worry about the outcome,
right?
Because the outcome is important. But it's finding that balance, especially in something like the Masters, where, hey, I'm present-minded. I'm here. I know what needs to be done. But I'm pretty damn close to, putting a 42 regular on that's all green. And I want that. And on top of that, and I didn't know this, but apparently, he was almost, well, again, the narrative of the media is what it is, but the narrative that was out there was, hey, he's playing more than just for himself. Like, he's playing for Japan. Like,
absolutely.
The thought was he's going to go home here in the next couple of days and he's going to be this national hero and it's going to propel Japanese golf. And I mean, those are things that you absolutely have to keep out of your head as you're going through that.
Yeah. It's a situation where you want to be mindful of it. It's there, but you're trying to figure out what's the best way for me to close the gap from where I am now to where I want to be. Mm-hmm. And it becomes down to your point. Yes, it's a goal and it's a performance-based profession and you've got to succeed. I mean, you can be as present moment as you want, mm-hmm. but you may be present moment sitting on the couch here in a year if you don't, if you don't perform. I mean,
well, present moment with, 1.6 or 7 or whatever the purse was versus present moment and with half that and being a major champion. And I mean, it matters. And it's interesting too, because, we talk about E+R = O and at that given time, there are actually several E's going on simultaneously. And, right. I mean, because you do need to be present minded, focused. This shot is the event and my reaction to this shot is the outcome that I'm going to get. But as soon as that happens, either right before or right after, I also have to realize that the event is also part of the event and my reaction to the pressure of the Masters and all of that is absolutely going to have an outcome as well. So it was really interesting, and it's really interesting to watch things like that now with some of the background and hearing from the Tyler Paziks and the Dave Myers and just the whole group, right? The Todd Setners and Andy Reeses and Brian Kites, all of them, to have some of that knowledge that they have shared with us and the listeners, to then watch it and go, wow, I wonder if person XYZ out there that's playing are they keeping some of these things in mind? Right.
But I was just thinking about something and I can't remember if this I know it was during the pandemic, but it was the one young golfer who won one of the majors here recently. It would have been one of the last ones. It wasn't the British or what's now referred to as the Open, but it was while might have been the US Open last year, whatever the case would be. But I just started thinking about it where we're starting to see some of these younger golfers that are winning. That guy was like right out of college, not too long. You've got Matsuyama, who is a relatively young golfer as well. I wonder if things change, to your point about the pucker factor, if, you've got reduced galleries right now at some of these tournaments. So there's still that. It's still the Masters. There's still that aura about all of this. But you know how it is when you get those big crowds that are like chasing Tiger or whoever, and it's got to still be, really intense.
For sure. But I think, too, those young guys have come up with some of these things that we're talking about already in their bag, so to speak. And you look at a kid like Zalatoris, I think he's 23, 24, fresh out of Wake Forest. Never looked like the stage was too big. And you don't know, is that him being just mentally dialed in, or is it one of those things where you're so young you don't know any better? Right? That whole ignorance is bliss thing. And there's something to be said for that.
Well, I also think the early exposure, we've talked about this, as the early exposure, so many experiences these young athletes have nowadays, whether they're playing in some pretty competitive AAU tournaments or pretty competitive, travel baseball, whatever the case may be, college baseball, college basketball or whatever. I think that by the time they get to that point, it's not like it used to be where, it might have been the first time you were ever even in a tournament like that. I mean, it's not the Masters, but they're playing in some tournaments and some things where the stakes are pretty high and they need they need to get it done. So Bob Tewksbury, great guest we had on last week and been getting a lot of feedback from that episode. One of the things that I actually was wanting to talk to Bob about that it's interesting we're having this conversation right now, was he had done a article. This was when he would have been a mental skills coach for the Cubs. And there was an article that had appeared in the Chicago Tribune that talked about the perception a lot of people have of big league ball players or professional athletes in general, that they always are focused. They're always confident. They're always successful at managing those, thoughts and emotions. But the reality of it is, he said some of the best players in the game are some of the most insecure. And you just made me think about that when we were having this conversation, is that we observed it from this weekend. We saw it with some of these guys, but there's also a lot of those guys that are pretty daggone good that don't always manage those things, even from week to week. I mean, you get somebody like Rory McIlroy or somebody like that who has been at a high level, but still, I mean, emotions are going to come into play,
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, we're all still human, and there's always factors that, it's easy to talk about control the controllable. I mean, everything that we talk about is it's great to talk about, but at times it's hard to actually implement and practice. And that's where I think for our listeners, it's so good to hear from different people how they are applying it, because just like anything else, some people learn from reading, some people learn from doing, some people learn from, watching or listening, and everybody's got a different, skill set to learn. And it is, to your point, it's difficult. I mean, I know I went through streaks, both hot and cold. And, when you're in the hot streak, you don't know that, you don't think you can ever get out again. And then, 2 weeks later, you don't know if you're ever going to get a hit. Like, you wonder, what did I do? How did this happen? And it's interesting because part of that insecurity, and it goes back to kind of this dichotomy of who you are as an individual. Part of that insecurity is also that driving force that keeps them practicing, or gets you to go to the tee, or get you out on the driving range, or get you in the gym, or whatever it is. And that insecurity can be something that propels you to greatness. But it's learning how to manage that between your ears, to that becomes, really, really complicated.
And understanding that your point about E plus R equals O is understanding that one of the things I think happens a lot, and you made me think about one of the lines one of my college coaches, Lawrence Nusselrote, used to always say is there's two types of players in baseball, those that are humbled and those about to be. And it's so true. It's like, everybody's going to go through those things. But I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is when they get thinking that they need to be comfortable, that they want to be in a safe place. Life happens. Like you're going to face things that come up. And I think if anything, I hope that the conversations we've been able to have with some of these performance coaches, some of these mental skills guys has taught the listeners that it's not it's not to the desire to go through life where things aren't happening. It's just unrealistic. Like the whole thing is about preparing for how you're going to handle those moments when things don't go your way, where you're going to have to still go figure out a way to get something done when maybe your plan A didn't work out. Now you have to revert to plan B. But I think it's really important, and we've been talking a little bit about this recently. I think you said this on one of the last shows about, people will get upset when things don't go their way. And it's like, don't be upset with the results you aren't getting from the work you aren't doing. Right. Like it all comes back to whether it's how you respond to something, whether it's just having the discipline to go out and put the work in that's going to help you achieve that goal. But it all is like about effort. It's all about at some point. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
I mean, effort and responsibility. I mean, it's that whole EAT mentality, right? I mean, the things that I can control are my effort, my attitude, and my toughness, whether that's physical or mental. And yeah, I mean, it always drives me crazy when I have a player or even myself or anybody that says, "Hey, gosh, they're against me, or it's this, it's that, or it's whatever." And it's like, okay, you and I have been on teams. I know I have. I don't want to speak for you, but there are a lot of people that I have played various sports with that I didn't necessarily either like or that I even thought were good people, right? Either for whatever reason. But the one thing that I had to respect was their grind and their ability to make it to where a coach, it didn't matter. Like the coach had to play them. Like, you know what I mean? Like they were so good or so important. It didn't matter if they were a jerk or not. It didn't matter. They had to be out on the field. And I tell kids all the time, like, man, make yourself, invaluable. Make yourself to where I can't. You want to bitch about playing time? Okay, well, I'll listen to you. But what are you doing about it?
Yeah, it comes down to, and I think they had a thing here recently I saw on Facebook or somewhere where Gino Ariema from UConn, women's basketball coach, was talking about, and this kind of goes a little bit back to the effort discussion, but he was saying that it's pretty simple. If you're wanting to get A's, you have to do A type study habits, right? Mm-hmm. If you want B's, then you're going to have B type study habits. Like it all equals you're getting the results that for the work you've put in. And Brian Kite talked about this on the show, is this idea of no blaming, complaining, or deflecting. But all the things you were just talking about a minute ago, we've had teammates like that where everything was always the umpire's fault. It's always, I can't catch a break. I don't understand what's going on. I can't hit. I can't, like, everything was so negative, and it's so toxic on a team. When I'm working with some of the teams I work with, I always say, when I describe that player, I always say to them, hey guys, think about a player on your own team that does this, that, is all the time whining about stuff, all the time complaining, all the time getting angry about things or whatever. And then I always say, if you can't think of anybody, it's probably you.
Sure. Well, and I mean, I know there are teammates that probably look back and are like, man, Brandon was a complete ass. Like, I can think of, I can think of it. I can think of an inter squad scrimmage, and looking back on it,
things got a little heated.
I love this guy, but I remember inter squad scrimmage, and he came up and he hit me right in the head, and I don't think it was intentional. Looking back on it, but at the time I was heated. And I remember picking the ball up and throwing it at his feet and said, essentially,
right,
I'd throw at me too, because God knows you weren't going to get me out. So, I mean, you have those moments, but I think. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say where I thought you were going to talk about was the example, and we won't name names or anything, but we also had an intra-squad scrimmage when we were down at the College of Charleston, and we had a helmet get spiked pretty close to my proximity.
Oh, yeah.
Over somebody being angry about a outcome that happened from an AB that they had. And I don't know what it was, but I just wasn't having it. I turned around and was pretty angry about that. Maybe it was because the helmet almost hit me. But it's also, I think, where you have to have, and we were just both situations, we were young players on that team. I mean, we were newbies, but you got to come in and have guys that are going to hold each other accountable, and they're going to say, hey, it's that, what you tolerate, you promote, right? And, and what you're willing to tolerate. And that's why it's so important to be able to step in no matter what level you are. Like, I think that having standards and making sure everybody is bought into those standards, whether you're on a business team, whether you're on an athletic team, whatever the case may be, you're only going to get better as an organization if you aren't willing to tolerate people performing below a certain standard.
Well, sure. And to your point, I think that what you just said was critically important, is that even at the time, and not that you and I were these massive difference makers at the College of Charleston, but when they're recruiting kids, you're always looking for someone to either can come into your culture of excellence that you already have, or hopefully even raise it a notch or two. And I think coming in young and fiery and it was kind of something that was. Everybody was kind of looking for, right? And I think everybody on those teams back then were extremely hungry and really working hard. But I also remember, I remember one time we were running with bats over our heads.
Oh my gosh.
And someone said something to the effect of, oh yeah, like this is going to get us out to Omaha. And I remember lighting them up, like, with a lot of explicatives. Like, if you don't think that we have a shot, then what are you doing out here? Like,
right.
We don't, I don't want that around me.
Yeah.
Like, we may not get there. We may not be the program that gets there, or we may not be the team, but it doesn't mean that we can't help build a team that ultimately gets there. And so anyway,
you have it nailed, because that's one of the things that, from a culture standpoint, you may not always be part of the team that is going to host the banner in the gymnasium that is the state championship, or it's in college, the conference championship or national championship, or whatever the case may be. But you're always in a position, no matter where you are, to leave a mark and leave it better than you found it. And I think if you go into any endeavor, whether it's a business endeavor, athletic endeavor, scholastic endeavor, whatever the case may be, is you should have those goals in mind that you're going to leave it better than you found it. And it starts with that, helping create the culture. I mean, I probably told this story before, but when Coach Meg was on, the whole reason we got into the MVP process and the whole reason we started that at Bridgewater was because I had told those players, look, the best thing you could possibly do is be the group that changed the culture of this organization. Because years from now, if you all win a conference championship or something like that, that may be something that, some people will remember. But you and I both know there's a lot more to being a student athlete we remember than the wins and losses. I can tell you that right now. I mean, every story I talk about has less to do with games we won or games we lost and way more about, you laying in the floor of the bus for 22 hours.
Well, on purpose, by the way.
It wasn't after a bender or anything like that.
but I think too, like, it is, and it kind of shows the importance of the process and not being the results driven. And I think to that end, I want to say it's an old Stoic quote or whatever, and it basically says, either goes wise is the man or great is the man. But I think it's great. Great is the man that plants a tree that he'll never sit under, or he'll never receive the shade from. Right, and it's all about kind of planting those seeds and letting it grow and pouring into something that you may never benefit from, right? Personally. But the whether it's the team or it's the community or whatever. And, it's one of those things that that's one of those sayings that really drives me as a coach, right? Is that, hey, hopefully I'm doing stuff that plants a seed into a young man that he can go out and succeed in life and whatever that looks like, right? That's and as a parent too, right? I mean, that's the thing.
What's the old? It's Alonzo Stagg is the coach, but when he's the famous story of him. So a reporter asked him one time, what kind of team are you going to have? And he said, I'll let you know in 20 years.
Right.
Meaning, hey, but my job as a coach is not to prepare these men for the next 4 years. It's to prepare them for the 20 years from now when they are, contributors to communities and fathers and brothers. And yeah.
And I remember, and I still do. I mean, I have parents that, not so much now, because now they're really concerned about their kid.
Yes.
But in the past, we'd have, hey, what do you, how do you think you're going to be this year? And to your point, it's like, hey, I always looked at the success of the previous year, especially when you're talking about rec league and when kids can choose to play again or not play again. That was always my judge of the season, was how many kids off of last year's team have decided to come back, right, and play again because they enjoyed the experience or they enjoyed whatever it was that we were able to accomplish on last year's team. And, kids grow out of stuff, just like, but I always felt like we had a pretty good track record as far as that goes.
I think if I'm being honest with myself, I probably was not as good at that when my kids were little as I would be now. I think as I look back on it, if I'm being honest, I was probably a little too performance driven with them, where I should have just kind of been like, just go have fun, go out there and do the give good effort, have good attitude and all of that. I read something recently from a guest that we're going to be having coming on the show here in a couple of weeks, Brett McCabe, who is a mental performance coach, sports psychologist for University of Alabama for a lot of their sports teams. And Brett was saying that parents, please take advice on this, because I just said, I was guilty of this myself, but when your son or daughter gets done with that game and they get in the car, that's not the time to give all these critiques on how they played and what they could have done better and everything that you think they need. It really is not. That's when you just want to talk about anything. Unless you plan on saying, I really appreciated the effort you played out there today, or what a great teammate you were. I really like this.
I loved watching you play. Yeah,
I loved watching you play.
It was amazing watching you go out and compete. Like
right.
Those are the affirmatives that they're looking for. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it's the car ride home. I mean, there's several articles out there talking about, as a former athlete, they always hated the car ride home.
Right.
Especially after a bad game or a loss. And I can tell you that I've had car ride homes where it was like it wasn't good, but I think, and my kids would be the ones that would have to answer. But if we have those conversations, it's typically around effort and commitment. It's not about
scoring,
like what you scored, what you didn't do. It was really about, hey, where are you? Did you want to be out there? Were you committed to helping the team today? Like, just things to reflect on, instead of, my God, you were so soft getting rebounds. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Or, hey, what happened on that sweep? Why didn't you come up and fill the run gap there? That kind of stuff was never. I hope not. I mean, I know some of it is, but
emotions get into it for sure, and we all have the best of intentions with it, but it's one of those things that I think is, if I could give any advice to those young fathers who are just starting out with this or whatever, it's just let them play. They're going to get a lot more out of it in the long run. And really, to be honest with you, when all is said and done and it's their senior year, depending on if they're going to go play sports after high school or not, you'll realize pretty quickly that all of those things that you stressed about when they were 12, 13, 14, 11, 10, 9, whatever the case may be, championships and all these things, is meaningless. All you would rather do is just see them play another game, of anything, just to keep that going,
And to that end, be patient, like you said, because if you do want to see the most games out of your children, they have to enjoy it. I see it so often with kids now at 13 years old, 14 years old, they're tapping out.
Well, they're going to these like specialized coaches and swing coaches and pitching coaches and like all these different things. And that's the other thing too, is, I'm guilty of this when the kids were little, and they enjoyed it. And, but some of these times, I mean, there's kids that are playing sports 365 days a year right now. Like they're literally on some team that long. And I don't care. There is such thing as too much of a good thing. Like you've got to be able to schedule some breaks in there where they're just out doing kid stuff, because they're going to be a lot better off for it, in the long run.
Well, for sure. And I think, again, and when you have been there and done that, and I know for you and I, having the opportunity to have played beyond high school, you don't feel sometimes that pressure that maybe another parent feels about living out that dream, so to speak, quote unquote, that they couldn't necessarily accomplish. And I think too, you also gain perspective in that. I absolutely loved baseball, and I would never know that there were times in the season where it's just like, man, I've had enough. I
Right.
I need a day or two just away from the game.
I think parents make the mistake of thinking that it's a reflection on them. Like if their son or daughter isn't one of the better athletes on the team, or isn't the scorer or whatever. And we've all seen this make its rounds around, social media, but that is not the reflection on you. What is a reflection on you is if your kid's a good teammate, if the kid's coachable, and all of those things. Those are the things that truly are a reflection on you. But it's just one of those things, I think, understanding that it's not that big a deal. I mean, it's one of those situations that you may worry about it. You're going to worry about what's the thing my dad used to always say is you'll worry about what people think of you until you realize how little they do.
Absolutely. Another nugget. Absolutely. And the one thing that I would leave as far as this particular subject goes is, and hopefully the answer is never, but when was the last time that you spoke about someone else's, either as a parent or whatever, based upon their child's performance on a sports field?
Right. Exactly.
Other than, man, and again, as a coach, I can, and I have, walked up to parents and just said, hey, listen, I just want you to know, man, you're raising a great kid. I don't know what you're doing at home, but I can tell you he's polite, he's coachable, he's interested, he's a yes sir, no sir kid. He comes up after practice, hey coach, appreciate the time. I mean, you're raising a young man that has gratitude and is appreciative of the opportunity. Now, you may be telling him he has to do it after every practice, before every practice, whatever, but know that he's coachable, because if you're telling him, he's doing it. And that's pretty cool. So.
It makes a difference. And I love what you just said there, because we as parents now and coaches, we can change that narrative, because I do think that what you just said is so important is take the time to go up, and if you want it to be less about how kids are playing out on the court or on the field, then go up to those parents like Brandon did and say to them, hey, I really wanted to commend you on what your kid is doing. I watched the way they play. I watched their effort. I watched the way they handle their teammates, the way they're coachable. I think that's outstanding, because I think that's going to change a lot of things. And trust me when I tell you, like when I was working a lot of the UVA baseball camps and stuff, you would see the players that were picking up trash in the dugout. Like, we're doing all these things that nobody asked them to do. I mean, that stands out. You'll remember that a lot more than you will, the kid that lit it up throughout the whole camp. Because all of a sudden now that becomes a separator, right? That's the thing that's making a difference. So anyhow, great discussion there. Guys, we're going to wrap up the show, but we do want to let you know about a upcoming guest we have that's actually going to be on this Friday's show, Lauren Williams, who I'm really, really fired up about hearing Lauren and her story. She's a former D1 hockey player who you'll hear. She played at University of Wisconsin. She was the number one pick taken in the Canadian draft, the Women's Hockey League draft, and just has turned, another one who's given back, another one who's kind of that servant leader who is now working as she went and got her master's degree in clinical psychology, and she's now working as a mental performance coach for some hockey teams. She also does it for a company called Elite High Performance. So really anxious for Brandon and I to sit down with Lauren and hear more about her story. So that will be this Friday. As always, podcast at mentaladvantage.net. We really would love to have a show soon where it's just Q&A. It's just literally us answering questions that you guys have. That was the intent of these kind of Tuesday shows. So if you all have any questions or comments about guests that we've had on now, make sure you take the time to send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net and just ask away, and we will answer them on a show. We may even give you a shout out. I don't know what that would do for anybody, but at least you'll know it's not just Brandon and I filling up the inbox with questions. So awesome.
Thanks for the time, buddy.
Yep. I'll talk to you.
All right. See you. Bye-bye.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.